Dear metal gods, I know I'm just a little boy now, but someday, when I'm big and strong, I swear to you, I will grow up to become one of the fiercest advocates for heavy metal in the whole entire world. I will sing Black Sabbath's praises. I will speak the glorious word of Judas Priest to all who will listen. Whatever the cost may be, I will shout, metal up your ass, on the beaches and on the landing grounds. I will scream, death to false metal, in the fields and in the streets. I will praise Iron Maiden in the hills. I will never surrender. Heavy metal, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. John Humberto Laszlo McKeever, my brother, my friend, my co-host. We are back! Heavy Metal 101, season number 4 is go. Are you ready for the overwhelming assortment of gloriousness to come?
Well, we'll see. I feel like we're kind of running into the bad decade soon, aren't we?
You have this really negative understanding of the 1990s as bad. And I think you'll find over the course of this season, it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, there are bad things for some bands, including the band under discussion today. But generally speaking, I think some extraordinary music was made in the 1990s. And I might even argue that the sum total of heavy metal in the 90s is equal, if not superior, to the sum total of heavy metal in the 80s. Are you scandalized?
I mean, that feels like a bold statement with my 0% knowledge.
I'm a bold man, John. Well, anyway, it is probably fair to say that this, the premiere episode of Heavy Metal 101, season number 4, is probably the single most important media event of the past 25 years, correct?
Yeah, that seems true.
I agree. I think it's pretty damn exciting. Meanwhile, how goes your summer? Did you, perhaps, purchase any houses?
It's been a big summer. Purchased a house, moved, all these things. Yeah, real adult shit happening here.
I am so proud of you and all of the wonderful things in your life. Congratulations.
Thank you. Of course, it means now we have to record permanently over Zoom, but somehow we'll survive.
We're going to survive. I feel like our audio situation is in a good place, and I think it's going to be okay. I do miss seeing your adorable face right next to me physically while I record, but still, virtual John is just as nice, maybe even nicer in some respects.
I was going to say, virtual John is probably nicer.
Less stinky?
Well, just, I'm kind of stuck here. I can't just get up and walk away in the middle of our recordings.
Oh, that's true. That is nice. I agree. Well, anyhow, with your new home, I am looking forward to you hosting a delightful barbecue meet and greet with all of our esteemed HM101 Patreon supporters at some point in the near future. Now that, my friend, I think will be a delight, no?
I feel like if our fans had the opportunity to either meet me or meet you, they'd pick meeting you.
I would be there, obviously.
Oh, you're going to come.
Show up.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. This would be like hanging with the guys from Heavy Metal 101.
Lovely. That sounds great.
For a large donation. Huge amounts of money.
Yes.
Obviously.
Insane amounts of money. I like that we're continuing this bit into a second season, though.
Yeah, right?
We'll continue to mention a Patreon that does not exist and all the perks we will offer you.
No, I have big news momentarily. Big news on that front. Big news. So stay tuned. You staying tuned?
It's big news for me too, fellow listeners.
Well, I have little news for you, but big news for the listeners. Now, I am so glad that you are in this exciting place. You have this wonderful new job, new house. It's all excellent. I, on the other hand, am currently, as we speak, spending my entire summer working through my doctoral comprehensive exam. And boy, are my arms tired. Did I land that joke?
Nailed it. That's exactly the kind of joke you should be making at this point in the process. I remember that process well, and I am glad I am past it.
Yes. My brain is more than a bit squishy these days, so please bear with me over the course of today's recording. I'm going to do my damnedest. Now, anyhow,
It occurred to me at some point during those sad, quiet times in which we weren't podcasting that it has actually been a really, really long time since you and I reminded the people of who we are, of our bona fides, and also what we do when we're not heavy metal podcasting. So I thought, in honor of this shiny new season, that we might each take just a moment to once again tell the nice people who it is we are, and maybe something about our personal relationships with heavy effing metal. Does this sound okay to you?
Sure, if you want to reopen that wound for everyone, we can absolutely go back to that place.
Swell. Look, I'll go first. I'm Eric. I am a university music professor and the music director of a conservatory school of dance, as well as a lifelong metalhead, teaching music, heavy metal, Satan, and adorable online kitten videos. These are a few of my favorite things. And alcohol. And my family. They're great too. Love them to pieces. John, who are you, buddy? Who, truly, are you?
I'm John.
Hi, John.
I am an orchestral conductor. I am the director of orchestral activities at the University of Missouri. I am not a lifelong metal fan. I basically didn't know anything about metal before becoming a part of this podcast. And as those of you who have listened to past episodes know, I haven't retained any of the information we've discussed over the past 4 seasons of this podcast.
That's John's superpower.
It is my blessing that you can tell me something and I will forget it within the next 15 to 20 minutes.
So that, friends, is who we are. But who are you, beloved listeners? If you like listening to this podcast, don't hesitate to reach out and tell us all about yourselves, your relationship to heavy metal, and what you think of our wee little show. All of our contact info can be found in the show notes. Feel free to email, leave us a voicemail, or contact us via social media at any time. We love to hear from you. Also, we always appreciate reviews and ratings on whatever podcast platform on which you listen. We love those so very much. They brighten our whole motherfucking week. Right, John?
Well, I know they make you exceptionally happy. I do get screenshots of every single one that you receive via text, so that's something.
That is definitely something. Oh, wait, here's the big news. Maybe, just maybe, you want to take things to the next level. Maybe you want to express your love for HM101 via a modest financial contribution. If so, please do visit our Patreon page, which is also linked in this episode's notes. You can't imagine the gleaming beauty that is John's smile upon receiving the notification of a fan's Patreon contribution. John, would you agree that this is truly something majestic to behold?
Yes, Eric, I would. Tell me and the listeners, what types of special bonus content will the fans be receiving if they subscribe to our Patreon?
So, beloved listeners, if you do indeed choose to contribute to us via Patreon, we will be so pleased, but you will also get special access to unique content only available via the Patreon page. You'll get John responding to albums. You'll get the playlists that John listens to in order to prepare for this episode. You will get access to the never before published, very first unedited recording effort of Heavy Metal 101. It's just an exciting, if modest, cornucopia of joy. So please do come on, check it out. We'd love to have you.
You know what I love about that, Eric?
What's that, John?
It sounds like it's mostly me, which is what we know everyone loves about this show. All of me and my opinions, uneducated as they are.
It's basically the next best thing to having John as your personal buddy.
I assume it's all the stuff you cut out of the episodes. It's just like all of my
That would literally be
responses.
like, and yeah, that would be like 16 straight hours of John saying bullshit. I'm not going to torment the fans. I'm just going to, give them some amount of incentives. That's the idea. Okay, then. Mayhaps we might want to consider moving this thing along and getting to the actual content of today's tremendously exciting fourth season premiere, Iron Maiden in the first time of the Bruce. John, we love Iron Maiden. We love Bruce. Could anything in the entire world be more exciting than an Iron Maiden fronted by Bruce?
I guess there's only one way to find out.
Let's go. On that very note, I gave you quite a listening assignment to prepare for this episode, which included all of the legendary 1982 album, The Number of the Beast, as well as a few selections from every album through the Bruce's 1993 departure. We'll get into the nitty-gritty details shortly, but just broadly speaking, what were your thoughts on this material?
I liked it. Number of the Beast has the song on it that was my introduction to Iron Maiden in Run to the Hills, and largely, I had nothing I could complain about with this music. It was very disappointing.
It's true, folks. John texted me after having listened through this fantastic album, and he didn't say one negative thing. Literally not one. Is that an accurate assessment?
That is accurate.
Iron fucking Maiden. Look, this is unquestionably some of the most important music in all the history of all the world. Well, the quality of the work in the early 90s, it did tail off a little bit. Iron Maiden in the 80s was a truly remarkable musical institution. And Iron Maiden with Bruce Dickinson, nay, Bruce, was absolutely a match made in fricking heaven, or perhaps hell. Whatever floats your boat. Regardless, this is the good stuff. Quick note, for those interested in Maiden's pre-Dickinson history and work, we have HM101 Season 2 episodes dealing with both the band's origins and eponymous debut, as well as their sophomore album, Killers. Do check those out if you haven't yet done so. And now, without further ado, we pick up our story in a time of great uncertainty and even greater possibilities.
By the year 1981, Iron Maiden vocalist Paul Di'Anno was not a well man. His drug usage was out of control, and his level of professionalism was no longer acceptable to the band. As such, Di'Anno was officially let go following the tour supporting Iron Maiden's second album, Killers.
Or maybe he left in a huff. It really depends on who is telling the story. Regardless, Di'Anno's final show as a member of Iron Maiden was on September 10th, 1981.
Beloved Heavy Metal 101 icon, Bruce. Born Paul Bruce Dickinson, and better known to fans around the world as Bruce Dickinson, auditioned for the band later that very same month. Dickinson had been singing for the Nawabum band Samson since late 1979, but was now ready to move on to bigger and better things. He nailed his audition, of course, and officially became Iron Maiden's new lead singer on September 26, 1981. And nothing would ever be the same again.
Bruce Dickinson is a fascinating dude. Aside from absolutely being one of the greatest singers in the history of heavy metal and an excellent songwriter, he's also a world-class fencer and has worked professionally as a commercial airline pilot. And, as I can attest to after listening to him narrate his autobiography over the course of an 11-hour span, he is also, perhaps, just a wee tad bit insufferable. Yikes! Regardless, he's a truly incredible frontman with a truly incredible voice. And in joining Iron Maiden, he helped to take arguably the single best band of the Nawabum to the next level and on to true heavy metal world domination. John, isn't this exciting?
It's very exciting. I mean, I love fencing. So great to get another thing to like about this guy.
You are in the right place. It's going to be all fencing from here on out.
Perfect.
Actually, in candor, I would say probably a solid fifth of his 11-hour autobiography is about either fencing or flying. No, I'm underselling it. Probably about a third is about fencing and flying collectively.
Feel like that is not what the people were tuning in for.
I concur with your assessment. Regardless, it's very exciting. This is very, very exciting. And now, The discography. The discography. The discography. The discography. The discography.
22nd March, 1982. The number of the beast.
Okay, JM, let's not leave the good people hanging. I want deets. You listened to this entire iconic album, and we want to know all of your thoughts regarding Iron Maiden's legendary first release with Bruce Dickinson, The Number of the Beast.
I mean, it's a great album from start to finish. You know, I listened to the whole thing in one sitting without stopping, without going anywhere, and each track is solid. There's a great ebb and flow to the album, and it's just, you know, really enjoyable music.
John, this isn't why we have you on this show. I don't know what the fuck's going on here. This is a mess.
We got time. It's a long episode.
The funny thing is, I'm actually going to have more negative things to say about this album than you are.
Well, that's great. It's good. I mean, look, you know, if you want me to be super, super critical, the lyrical content, I don't super care about. And while there is contrast, there's a lot of sort of the same thing in terms of the general feel of the songs, but it's a really good thing.
Respect. John McKeever, Iron Maiden fan. Look, this album was a total game changer for Iron Maiden. While Killers had charted at number 12 in the UK and number 78 in the US, The Number of the Beast made it all the way to number 1 in the UK and cracked the top 40 in the US, peaking at number 33. Its release was also followed by the legendary 184-date The Beast on the Road World Tour. The album and subsequent tour collectively helped solidify Maiden's position as burgeoning international heavy metal superstars. And yet, I actually have very slightly mixed emotions about The Number of the Beast. Look, much of the album is without a doubt truly magnificent. The title track, Run to the Hills, 22 Acacia Avenue, and Hallowed Be Thy Name are some of the band's most iconic and oft-performed tracks, while Children of the Damned and The Prisoner are at most just one teeny notch below those others. That said, it is only an 8-song album, and I actually do think that both of the songs I haven't yet mentioned, the opening track, Invader, and the penultimate track, Gangland, are pretty weak. Like, they're not super memorable, they're not as interesting or as powerful as every other song on the album. And that's particularly problematic when it comes to the opener. I actually really don't like Invader that much. It's okay, it's fine. But John is a big fan, I don't want to offend him.
Look, I mean, we're used to you not liking the things that pretty much everyone universally agrees are good. It's okay.
It's so true. I mean, look, this is very much a similar situation to my feelings on Judas Priest's British Steel. Like that album, Iron Maiden's most famous album, it just simply isn't among my personal favorite releases within this extraordinary band's extraordinary discography. It's an excellent album, but it's not my favorite. John, does this make me a terrible person?
No.
Good. There's other things that make me a terrible person?
Yes.
Good, good. That is true. That is true. Look, all of that having been said, Run to the Hills really is fucking pretty damn unstoppable, right?
No, I mean, amazing. Like I said, the first Iron Maiden song I ever heard, loved it from the very first time I heard it. Just great.
Yeah, it's awesome. Look, just a few TNOTB fascinating facts of note before we move on. Aside from being Dickinson's first album with the band, this would also be drummer Clive Burr's last. As usual, the story of Burr's departure sounds different depending on who is doing the telling, but the general consensus is that he was fired during the Beast on the Road tour, primarily for no longer getting along with bassist and band leader Steve Harris. You gotta get along to get along. Burr was immediately replaced by the final piece of the classic Maiden lineup puzzle, legendary former church buddy of my father-in-law and drummer extraordinaire, Nico McBrain. Another interesting fact. Due to contractual issues with Sampson's management, Dickinson has no writing credits on this album. And, last but not least, as of 2022, The Number of the Beast has moved 20 million units worldwide, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty impressive, right?
That's pretty good.
Oh, I should also definitely mention that artist Derek Riggs' album cover, which features a massive Eddie as the puppet master pulling the strings of Satan himself, is particularly iconic, and that this, along with the album's title, managed to raise the ire of American conservative Christian activists who branded the band as Satanists. So that's fun. For the record, Iron Maiden covers are incredible, and Derek Riggs is generally the associated artist. We'll talk about a few of those today. As we've so many dang albums to cover, I'm not going to do an official listening break quite yet, but I'm going to suggest that if you, the listener, don't know The Number of the Beast, you are missing out on a monumental genre classic, and you should remedy that as expeditiously as humanly possible. However, at the very, very least, every single person on God's green earth should familiarize themselves with the two singles, Run to the Hills and the title track, as expeditiously as humanly possible. Please feel free to pause the podcast and check those out if you haven't previously done so. John, do you have anything else to add about The Number of the Beast before we move on?
Nope.
Moving on!
16th May, 1983. Peace of mind.
Now that's P-I-E-C-E of mind. Those rascals. Anyhow, as we now have, at last, officially reached the complete assemblage of Iron Maiden's most classic lineup as of this release, before we move any further, I do believe that an official roll call is called for. John, please call the roll.
The classic Iron Maiden lineup, running from 1982 to 1990, was Bruce Dickinson, vocals, Dave Murray, guitars, Adrian Smith, guitars, Steve Harris, bass, and Nico McBrain, drums.
Yay! Maiden has always been a particularly literate band, and Peace of Mind is a particularly literate album, containing a whole bunch of songs based off a variety of literary sources. For instance, To Tame a Land, famously, was originally supposed to be called Dune. But apparently Frank Herbert was a total dick who didn't like heavy metal, and he would not grant the band permission. So the title had to be changed. We hate Frank Herbert now, right?
Who cares?
I care. The Trooper came from Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, while Flight of Icarus came out of Greek mythology, etc. And they say heavy metal is from meatheads. They're the meatheads, John. They're the meatheads. This album is a total killer through and through, but I included the two legendary singles, Flight of Icarus and The Trooper, on your playlist. Did they melt your puny meathead brain or what?
I liked both of these songs. I thought these were solid songs.
They're good ones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, The Trooper, particularly, I think, is just a stone fucking classic. Like, it just rocks so hard, so well.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid opening riff.
Yeah. Peace of Mind, really, is fucking brilliant. And I personally prefer it to The Number of the Beast any day of the week. Okay, so maybe it's a little bit goofy that there's a song based on the 1981 caveman film Quest for Fire, although that was originally based on a book, I might add. But this album otherwise just totally rules. It also brought the band some pretty serious American success, peaking at number 14 on the Billboard charts. This was, in part, on the strength of the hit singles. The Trooper, particularly, released on June 20th, 1983, actually managed to make something of a splash on American radio, which was rare for the band. John, I think that The Trooper merits an official HM 101 assigned listening break, don't you?
Let's do it.
Hell yeah! Now, The Trooper is a Steve Harris joint and is one of the band's signature tunes. Now, if you want to pump some pure Iron Maiden directly into your veins, pause the podcast, click the link, and get ready to get real high on the good stuff. The best stuff. We will be right back. And we're back. John, I am now high on pure frickin' adrenaline. Iron Maiden has transported me to heretofore undreamt of realms of musical glory. How you doing?
Hey, for this far into an episode, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, you look good. You look well.
It's a new season.
It is a new season, a fresh beginning for all of us. I take back all those things I said about you. I'm going to say all new things now.
I can't wait.
It is certainly worth noting that it was Peace of Mind that finally allowed Maiden to move up to arena headlining status in the US of A. America, John. America. That having been noted, shall we move on to quite possibly the single greatest heavy metal album of all time?
Another greatest heavy metal album of all time?
I said quite possibly. There's contenders.
It feels like every episode there's a contender.
There are many top tier albums, and this is one of them.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it!
3rd September, 1984. Power.
Holy shitballs. Power Slave. This is a motherfucker of an album. Absolutely. In terms of process, in the creation of this dandy little masterpiece, Maiden followed the exact same template as they had for its predecessor. First, they holed up in a quiet off-season hotel on the Isle of Jersey to compose the songs. Next, they flew off to the cozy tax shelter that is the Bahamas in order to do the actual recording. I don't know about you, John, but all of this sounds exceptionally pleasant to me.
Well, I know that's why we started this Patreon, so that we could just afford to go to the Bahamas for like a month at a time, knock out a season, and then get back to our day jobs.
I 100% endorse this scheme. Patreon. Join us, won't you? Clearly it was effective. Peace of Mind rules, and Power Slave is my favorite Iron Maiden album. I think it is basically flawless. Much like our relationship, John. Ipso perfecto.
Right.
I really wrestled with what representative songs to put on your playlist. The obvious choice were the two singles, 2 Minutes to Midnight and Aces High. Incredible tunes both. Frankly, all of the songs on this album are pretty gosh dang incredible. Even the wackily named instrumental, Lost for Words, Big Aura, is a ton of fun. But no, sir. Upon reflection, I decided that I believe in my co-host, and in his capacities as a musician, and as a now experienced listener of heavy metal. And so, John, I took a risk. I provided you with the monumental closing opus. Yet another one of those smart literary Maiden tracks, this time based on an epic poem by Samuel Coleridge Taylor. John, I gave you the 13-plus minute masterpiece, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. That is a lot of metal to chew on. How'd I do? Did my audacious gambit pay off? Or did you find yourself cursing me 7 minutes or so into this massive track?
No, I mean, you know me. One of the things that I've said that I like about songs is the content of the lyrics, which is not always great in the music that we have discussed in the past on this show. So I appreciated that this was really telling a whole entire story. I'm familiar with the poem, and it was nice to see. It was good. It was long. I did check like halfway through. It was like, is this the same thing? Okay, yep, we're still going.
But you weren't cursing. You weren't cursing at me while you did that.
No, and I appreciate, if you're going to have a 13-minute song, there better be sections and contrast and a reason for it to go on this long. And that was present, which is good. It wasn't just like 13 minutes of the same fucking thing over and over.
Right. Something that I think that Iron Maiden, really since the debut album, have really excelled at, and is particularly evident on this track, is word painting, is the idea of the musical material representing the content of the words, or even if there are no words, sort of an implied set of images and narrative storytelling and all that. I think they do an amazing job with that, and that is particularly on display in the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, so fucking great. Though I might argue that Iron Maiden sometimes do have a propensity for going a bit overlong with some of their tracks, particularly in the 21st century, I think every second of rhyme is actually really well earned. This is another one of them Steve Harris composed tour de forces. Now that dude can write a motherfucking song. Anyhow, by this point, Iron Maiden were unabashed international metal superstars, and the album hit number 1 in the UK, number 12 in the US, and also charted highly in Australia, Austria, Canada, the Netherlands, Finland, Germany, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland. You get the picture, no?
Sure.
All right, good. Big band. Big. Popular. Beloved. And if we're making some sort of effort at keeping track of iconic Derek Riggs album covers, I would point out that lobotomized Insane Asylum Eddie from Peace of Mind and Egyptian Pharaoh Eddie from Power Slave are both freaking great. This is the whole package. It's music, image, and just awesomeness. So what is the moral of the story so far? Listen to these fucking albums. I call all 3 of these first Dickinson-led Maiden albums utterly essential metal repertoire. John, what do you think? Are you going to go and check out Peace of Mind and or Power Slave at some point?
It's entirely possible that I might do that.
Yes. Good. Iron fucking Maiden. Up the irons, bruh. Yeah! The World Slavery Tour, supporting Power Slave, was absolutely massive, if arguably unfortunately named.
It's not great.
Starting in Poland in August.
Not great.
I mean, I think it maybe sounds different in 2024 than it did in 1984, but
I don't know, does it?
yeah, there's issues. It started in Poland in August of 84, and it ended in sunny California in July of 1985. In that span, the band played 28 countries in total. This workload nearly broke the band, and it pretty much did break Bruce Dickinson specifically. However, this tour also gave us the band's first live album, the classic Live After Death, which was released in October of 1985. Scream for me, Long Beach! Indeed. Awesome live album. Highly recommended. Now, thus far we've been on a straight upwards trajectory, floating ever higher into hallowed musical heights where only eagles dare. Things are going to get a bit more complicated on album number 6. John, are you ready for things to get a bit more complicated?
I'm just happy that so far I'm staying on track.
I'm impressed. You really are fresh as a daisy.
29 September 1986. Somewhere in ta.
Following the 331 days spent touring in support of Power Slave, Maiden were absolutely and utterly exhausted. Dickinson, particularly, was so burned out that he was to make a good faith effort to completely change the band's musical direction going into the next album, and hence wound up having all of his songwriting efforts for that album outright rejected by the band. Yikes. However, that's not to say that Maiden remained musically static. For better or worse, on album number 6, Somewhere in Time, the band began to experiment with the sonic possibilities of guitar synthesizers, the sound of which were to play a large role across the album. John, what are your thoughts on synthesized sounds, whether guitar or keyboard generated, in heavy metal?
I think you gotta be real careful. I think that stuff can sound shitty real quickly.
Would you say they've entered the danger zone?
I would say that.
Yeah. Now, look, as a pianist, I've no intrinsic problem with keyboards or synthesizers, but I, too, will say that heavy metal and synthesizers, they have a complicated relationship. All that having been said, I actually quite like what Maiden did with them on Somewhere in Time. While a lot of bands in this era were letting synthesizers make them sound a bit soft and, eventually, very dated, I think that Iron Maiden do handle them quite tastefully here, and the larger sonic palette works well alongside the album's science fiction themes. Somewhere in Time also has my single favorite Iron Maiden track on it, the Adrian Smith-penned classic, Wasted Years. John, this was on your playlist. Whatever did you think of Wasted Years?
So this directly followed Rime of the Ancient Mariner on my playlist, and it is a dramatically different sound. Like just a very, very, very different feel. Not bad, but different. I don't know if cleaner is the right word. I don't know. There's just like a different quality to the sound.
I mean, it's more direct and accessible in terms of its songwriting, obviously, than Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but it's also in terms of its production. It's got a clean 80s polish to it that I think earlier Iron Maiden didn't have.
It's also just like the very beginning, the tone of the guitars feels like it's a different tone from other things that I've heard from this band.
Fair enough. As I said, things get a little more complicated. It's a different sort of album, but it's just an unbelievably cool song, in my opinion. I love Wasted Years. So Somewhere in Time was actually yet another massive hit for the band. As a totality, I do think it is a distinctly weaker album than that which had come before, but I mean, we're talking about The Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, and Power Slave, so that's not saying all that much. It's also got my very favorite Maiden song, an awesome cover that features a cyborg Eddie, and the solid interpolation of state-of-the-art synthesizer technologies. But there just was no way that Maiden were going to stay at the preposterously high artistic level of Peace of Mind and Power Slave forever. John, are you worried that we're in the same boat? That the heights that we soared to in season number 3 couldn't possibly be sustained over the course of season number 4 and beyond?
Oh, Eric, heights is such a bold term.
You're saying that compared to what's to come, we have not yet begun to soar?
Let's say that, yes.
Great, great. Love it. So Somewhere in Time went platinum, and it hit number 11 on the Billboard charts. But was the band artistically beginning to slip just a bit? Were we nearing the end of Maiden's true classic period? John, what do you think?
I mean, just based on the next 3 songs you made me listen to, I'm going to say yes.
No! Don't you worry, buddy, because Maiden still had one more trick up their sleeves. I have 2 words for you. Concept, album. Iron Maiden had one more stone classic in them before they really did actually begin to seriously artistically slip. Huzzah! John, speak the magical incantation.
11th April, 1988. 7th son of a 7th son.
Ah, concept albums. Satan loves a freaking concept album. Hashtag facts. We've come across a few of these beauties in our heavy metal travels.
I'm sorry, we're not going to just roll past that. Hashtag?
Hashtag.
What decade do you think we are in?
The one with the hashtags.
No, my dear friend. I mean, look, people still use them, but nobody is saying that anymore.
Hashtag fuck you. That's good, right? All right. Well, I'll try and reduce my verbal usage of the word hashtag.
I think that's a great call.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Your editorial suggestions are always welcome. We've come across a few of these beauties in our heavy metal travels at this point. John, could you remind our listeners of what the term concept album actually means?
So, concept album is an album about a concept. No, it's like one cohesive idea, story, theme thing running through the entire album, right?
Yeah. Precisely that. Sometimes it is a narrative story, as it is in this case, but sometimes it's just that all the songs are around generally one theme. You're absolutely right. Ding, ding, ding. Good job, buddy.
Thank you. And if you go to Patreon, you can get my reaction to a concept album there just for you.
Like many a concept album, actually parsing out the story from Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is tricky. However, here and now, on this great and glorious day, my heroic co-host, John Fartenberg McKeever, will provide us with an elegantly clear, concise narrative for your listening pleasure. John, it's voiceover magic time. Go!
7 deadly sins. 7 ways to win. 7 holy paths to hell. 7 downward slopes. 7 bloodied hopes. 7 are your burning fires. 7 your desires.
The background.
The myth of the seventh son is an unbroken line of male siblings
In!
No.
They make it so big.
No.
That's what she said. Please, continue.
The myth of the seventh son and an unbroken line of male siblings being gifted with special powers dates back to at least the 16th century and is part of a lengthy history in the Western world of imbuing the number 7 with special significance. The science fiction author Orson Scott Card explored this idea in his 1987 novel, Seventh Son, which directly inspired the band to create their concept album magnum opus.
The story, song by song. 1. Moonchild,
Wherein the devil himself, speaking in first person, confronts the parents of the eponymous seventh son of a seventh son, and informs them that their son will serve him.
2. Infinite dreams.
Wherein the father of the seventh son is haunted by terrifying and possibly clairvoyant visions.
3. The first single, Can I Play with Madness? This.
Wherein an unstable prophet is consulted with unfortunate results.
4. The second single, The Evil That Men Do.
Wherein, according to Bruce Dickinson, the protagonist, quote, gets date raped by Lucifer, end quote. Make of this what you will.
5. Seventh son of a seventh son.
Wherein we witness the birth of the seventh son of a seventh son, with his future path, for good or ill, still uncertain.
6. The prophecy.
Wherein our hero foretells a looming disaster, and no one fucking believes him.
7. The third single, The Clairvoyant.
Wherein our hero, at last, has mastered his powers, much like Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. However, as it turns out, the powers of the seventh son of a seventh son will lead him first to confusion, and eventually to his death.
8. Only the good die young.
Wherein Billy Joel enters to sing us off with a rousing pop rock classic. Just kidding. Actually, it's wherein the seventh son of a seventh son is apparently not dead, but rather has come to realize the impotence of his clairvoyance in the face of disbelief and the powers of preordained fate. And also, the good part of him dies, young, or something, while the sinful part lives on, or something, whatever. Regardless, here is the dramatic outro, which was also the intro, which is structurally both nifty and effective.
7 deadly sins. 7 ways to win. 7 holy paths to hell. 7 downward slopes. 7 bloodied hopes. 7 are your burning fires. 7 your desires.
Alrighty. Now that we've completely cleared all of that up, let's listen to some goddamn music. Can I Play with Madness was the biggest in a series of 3 top 10 smash hits in the UK and was a Headbangers Ball video staple in my youth. So let's hop into the Wayback Machine and take ourselves a look and a listen. Everyone pause the show, click the link, and enjoy some very period imagery as well as a fantastic pop metal ditty credited to Smith, Dickinson, and Harris. Enjoy. Now, Sean, that is just all kinds of fun, no? What are your thoughts?
So I guess maybe it helps to know these 2 tracks were a part of a concept album, but this one felt kind of monotonous to me.
The song itself.
Yeah. And also very poppy.
Oh yeah, I agree. This is definitely Iron Maiden at their most accessible. I mean, it makes sense as a single, I think, but yes, this is definitely a very poppy song. The video is pretty dumb.
Yeah, the video doesn't seem, well, it certainly doesn't seem to have anything to do with the fucking song.
It doesn't have anything to do with the song or the wider concept, at least so far as I can say. But it's definitely of its time. And it's definitely a catchy song. It's not my favorite Maiden song or my favorite song on this album, but it is catchy.
Sure.
Well, anyhow. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, despite being quite possibly Maiden's most prog album to date, is in my estimation, as a totality, a really fantastic album across the board. My general sense is that among the Iron Maiden intelligentsia, this one was a bit more of a grower than a shower. And that its stature within Maiden's oeuvre really has only grown over time. That said, Seventh Son certainly had commercial success, peaking at number 1 in the UK and number 12 in the US. Though, that it certified only gold rather than platinum in the US shows maybe the first hints of something of a commercial downturn with American audiences. Was this a harbinger of things to come? Maybe. My guess, us Americans were all just totally distracted by Queensryche's prog metal concept album masterpiece, Operation Mindcrime, which had come out that same year. I know that I was. Have you ever been curious about what John thinks about Operation Mindcrime? I know I am. But I can't access that information without doing what, John?
Without subscribing to our Patreon, where you can find a complete listen-along to Operation Mindcrime, wherein I, in real time, listen to the album and tell you exactly what I think as it goes by.
Now, how could you possibly pass that up? Anywho, we've now come to an important juncture in our tale. The 90s are looming with sharp teeth and gnashing claws on the horizon. Entering the 90s was typically not such a great thing for beloved classic metal artists. John, do you feel a slight chill in the air?
I think that is the sensation known as the oncoming presence of me.
I think it's like a goose just walked over Eddie's grave. So let's just tear this Band-Aid off. Read us on into the next segment, would ya?
Iron Maiden and Bruce in the early 1990s.
Happy January of 1990, good buddy. It's a new decade. Exciting, no?
A very exciting decade. A time of change.
Much change, and perhaps the birth of my beloved co-host.
That is the decade of my birth.
Whew. Now, I'm assuming that this is going to be just yet another particularly auspicious decade for our beloved heavy metal. For instance, as of January 13th, 1990, the Billboard Top 40 albums had all kinds of heavy metal representation. Joe Satriani, Alice Cooper, Skid Row, Whitesnake, Motley Crue, Aerosmith. Milli Vanilli was at number 1, but life generally seemed pretty good for heavy metal. And yet, in that same month, January of 1990, Adrian Smith decided to leave Iron Maiden over artistic disagreements about the band's musical direction. Artistic differences. John, you and I have artistic differences, but we always make it work, right?
Some would argue that it's our artistic differences that really make this podcast thrive.
Indeed. But not so Adrian Smith and Iron Maiden. The dude was out of there. Also, just a few months later, that year, in May, Bruce Dickinson released his first solo album, the not terribly spectacular Tattooed Millionaire. This is an important occurrence in Maidenland for 2 reasons. Number 1, it is indicative of Bruce's innate wanderlust, artistic and otherwise, which eventually would lead to him leaving the band. Number 2, his principal collaborator on this album was a guitarist named Yannick Gers, an English musician with Polish ancestry, formerly of the Nawabam band White Spirit. And number 3, it would be Gers who would be tapped as Smith's replacement for Maiden's first album of the new decade. Speaking of which...
1st October, 1990. No prayer for the dying,
How to say this delicately? No prayer for the dying sucks. John, how did I do? Was that delicate yet clear?
Feels very delicate, yes.
Thank you. Smith, it seems, was completely correct in his assessment of the problematic direction in which the band was headed. And in his autobiography, Dickinson also claims, retrospectively, not to have been entirely comfortable with what the band was up to at the time. The basic gist was that No Prayer for the Dying was supposed to be an effort to, quote, get back to the basics, following the lavish prog of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. The band stripped out the keyboards, Dickinson went a bit more gritty and less operatic in his vocal delivery, and Maiden recorded the whole thing in a barn on Steve Harris's property. All of which would be totally fine if so many of the songs weren't so fucking stupid. Exhibit A. There is a song on No Prayer for the Dying called Public Enema No. 1. John, could you share your thoughts with us on that song title?
It's pretty dumb.
It's not smart. Remember, this is a very smart band. That's not a very smart song title.
No. Yeah.
I mean, puns are weak to begin with, and that's not a good one. It's not pleasant.
Nope. Not great.
No. And frighteningly enough, it's honestly not one of the worst songs on the album. No Prayer for the Dying does include one of Maiden's very worst songs ever, a Smith-Dickinson co-write, which may or may not be a continuation of the long-running Charlotte the Harlot saga, entitled Hooks in You. My God, is that song ever terrible. Also terrible, the hit single. Originally intended as a Bruce Dickinson solo track intended for inclusion on the Nightmare on Elm Street No. 5 soundtrack.
It's Super Friday!
The song Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter ended up as a Maiden track on No Prayer for the Dying and was a massive UK hit single. Interestingly, it was the band's only number 1 single there to date, which probably says something about something. It is also, indeed, a massive pile of musical shite.
Ugh.
God bless. I thought about putting that one on your playlist for, a sense of completism, and I decided it was not to anyone's advantage. So, you're welcome.
Thank you.
John, as we've previously discussed, you were always expecting that things were going to go wrong for heavy metal in the 1990s, right?
Well, that's just kind of what people say. I am being a parrot here, but generally speaking, no one seems to think terribly highly of the 90s musically.
Well, here you go. Exhibit A, motherfucker. A true shit show of an album from Iron Maiden. It technically charted well, hitting number 2 in the UK and number 17 in the US, but that it again only certified gold rather than platinum in the United States was a definite sign that continued commercial trouble was on the horizon. I will, however, admit that Eddie looks pretty cool rising from a grave on the cover, which, incidentally, was the final cover Derek Riggs would do for the band until, spoiler alert, their 21st century reunion with Dickinson. John, everything about this album makes me a bit sad. Can we just move on?
Hey, you run the show here.
Great! I've got good news and bad news. Let's begin with the good news.
11th October, 1992. Fear of the Dark.
Fear of the Dark is not a perfect album, but it is much better than its predecessor. Thrash-adjacent opener, Be Quick or Be Dead, is actually a bit of a true blue shit kicker. Childhood's End is one of my personal favorite Iron Maiden obscurities. The title track is a Stone classic. Basically, on Fear of the Dark, Maiden appeared to have found something approximating a musical footing for the early 90s. John, I did include the title track of this album on your mega mix. What did you think of that one?
I didn't love it. It's not bad, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really do it for me. It didn't have the energy that most of the songs from Iron Maiden that I like have.
In the 90s were a tough time for Maiden. I do think they pulled it out with this one, but there are differences. I get it. It's also lyrically really dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
It actually is about being afraid of the dark. And there's no metaphors at play here. It's about being scared of the dark. But that said, I think it's a pretty awesome song. I really like it. The main problem with Fear of the Dark, the album, was something which is a bit of an epidemic throughout the early 1990s. That is to say, due to bands now recording specifically with the amount of material which a CD could hold in their minds, albums just generally got too fucking long. And this is one of those albums. It's 58 minutes long. You could be longer, but it's too much material. They were not at their best, and they were just writing too much not memorable, mediocre stuff, including a shitty song about soccer hooligans. So that's not great. And also not great, Derek Riggs did not do the album cover. This is a problem. There were problems. Let's face it, 1992 was a really bad time to be a classic heavy metal band, particularly in the United States, where Fear of the Dark did not certify. No platinum, no gold, bubkus. Yikes. It did hit number 1 in the UK, so that ain't nothing. But in the wake of the September 1991 release of Nirvana's Nevermind, it was tough sledding for any metal band, not named Metallica, who didn't sell out by creating an accessible, milquetoast album under the supervision of a Canadian super producer. But I digress. Still, in May of 1992, pop metal and the Billboard charts were not yet wholly divorced. The top 40 that month included the bands Mr. Big, Def Leppard, and Ugly Kid Joe. But things were definitely getting a bit dicey. John, weren't you born sometime around then? Were you perhaps the heavy metal antichrist whose coming foretold a decade of darkness?
Well, I mean, I was born just a little bit after the release of Nevermind. So
So yes.
But maybe.
All right. This is interesting. I'm going to have to think about this. Anyhow, Bruce Dickinson's wandering eye, in combination with the recent weaker Maiden material and a less than auspicious commercial landscape, would eventually lead to his decision to leave the band in 1993. John, how does this make you feel? Bruce is moving on. He's learning to fly, metaphorically and literally. Are we sad, hopeful, intensely enraged?
It feels like they had a good run.
All right. Yeah. It's like a decade of decadence.
Yeah,
Everything must come to an end.
That's true.
Spoiler alert, again. Bruce would indeed be back to the fold after what would prove to be a shockingly excellent run of solo albums in 1999. So don't feel too sad. Here, I'm going to let you play act as Bruce in order to soften the emotional blow of his departure. Please read us the following compelling Dickinson quote regarding his departure in your best Bruce emulation. We're going to need a Nottinghamshire accent. That's East Midlands English. I assume you have one of those in your voiceover tool chest. Do it!
Why, I just thought that if I stayed with Maiden forever, all I would learn about was what it was like to be in Maiden. And in order to learn what it was like outside Maiden, you have to leave, because unless you left, nobody would take anything that you did seriously. It would always be like, oh, bless him, he's doing a solo record. Let him have his fun, and then he can go back to being in Iron Maiden. I hated that, so I thought, fuck it, I'll just leave.
I'd like to be very clear here that Heavy Metal 101 does not necessarily sanction the voice choices of our co-hosts. And to all of the people of the East Midlands, I'd like to apologize on our behalf. The final performance, at least for a while, with Dickinson and Maiden was August 28th, 1993. It was filmed, although Dickinson himself does not speak very highly of the show, and I must confess to never having had the pleasure of viewing it. Alrighty then. I sort of feel like we're ending on an Empire Strikes Back-esque dark note. Basically, as we begin the process of fading to black, the band is pretty fucked. The two Maiden 90s albums to come, featuring replacement singer Blaze Bayley, are controversial, to say the least. The rest of the 90s were not good for Iron Maiden. But John, I could never end an episode in darkness. That wouldn't be me. I'm Mr. Positivity, no?
Always Mr. Sunshine.
Indeed. So instead of fading to black, I want to close off our discussion of Iron Maiden, for now, with a glimpse into their tremendous, enduring legacy here in the 21st century. Let's flash forward and look in on a reunited version of Iron Maiden, now with 3 guitarists, in live performance in front of approximately 1.2 million people, headlining Rock in Rio in 2001. We're going to check them out performing the aforementioned Fear of the Dark. I think it's fair to say that the Maiden legacy, tarnished as it might have been in the 90s, was once again doing just fine as the 21st century dawned, and continues to shine in the here and now. And so one last time, dear listener, pause the podcast, click the link, and let's all watch us some Iron Maiden doing what they do best. Utterly kicking ass live in front of a massive, euphoric audience. John and I will be back on the other end with a few closing remarks. John, friend of mine, I think you and I can both agree that that was pretty fucking cool, right?
Well, I'm sure if you were there, it was awesome.
I mean, 1 million people singing along with the frickin' guitar riff, like how awesome is that?
I love being able to hear amateurs perform music that I've paid for. That's certainly one of my greatest joys in life.
You suck so much. You're the suckiest.
I just hate people.
So a million Brazilians in one place might not be your scene?
It might not be my scene. Not because they're Brazilians, to be clear. Just 1 million of any people is problematic for me.
So you just want to go on the record and say you are not anti-Brazil?
Look, the people I know from Brazil, great, love them.
Great people. Iron Maiden had a tough road to hoe in the 1990s, both with and particularly without Bruce Dickinson. But they eventually came out the other end fully intact and emerged into the 21st century as an indomitable heavy metal force to be reckoned with. Go team! But of course that is a story for another time. John, did you have a good time today?
Yeah, it's great to be back recording episodes.
It's so fun! So fun. What do you think? Are Iron Maiden with Bruce indeed one of the more spectacular ensembles in heavy metal history?
Well, I can't speak to history, but I can say that this is one of the, I counted earlier today, and I think 5 groups that I've enjoyed that we've discussed on this show. So that puts them in pretty good stead.
All right. I agree that if there is a collection of groups that John genuinely enjoys that we have discussed on this podcast, it is pretty sanctified, pretty sacred ground, musically speaking. The Iron Maiden Bruce discography is very impressive. Few bands can match the quality of work of Iron Maiden across the 1980s. Most of the 21st century stuff is actually pretty great too. Good stuff. Really, really good stuff. Anywho, thanks for listening, beloved HM 101 fans. John, do you have any parting words for the beautiful people?
No, thanks for being back here with us. I hope you enjoy whatever the hell Eric has planned for the rest of the season. Lord knows I don't know what it is.
It'll be an exciting surprise for all of us. Okay then, we're about ready to hit the road. Please do remember to reach out via email or social media if you have questions or comments. We love questions and comments. And until next time, to quote the great Theodore Seuss Geisel, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.